Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. And we're zooming in and focusing in on a really important topic when it comes to handling difficult people, toxic individuals, manipulative individuals. And that is really how to get rid of or ameliorate or lessen the patterns of suffering that are set up within these very problematic relationships with people who are malignant, narcissistic, psychopathic. Maybe they're just really annoying, or they just sort of tend to set you up or push your buttons. No matter what label you're putting on this individual, it really doesn't matter. What really matters is understanding the fact that you are suffering, and to understand furthermore the cause that has created this effect in your life. So I know we have a lot of viewers who have been targeted, manipulated by toxic individuals who are really using them as a stepping stone or a sort of trampoline mat to get them and launch them to above superior position, above and beyond them. So part of the scapegoating and the targeting can be that you have been made to feel taken advantage of, less than, told some unsavory things about yourself, or all of a sudden, they're walking through the tulips, coming out in shining armor, looking like the one who's always right, who's got the right viewpoint, the right attitude, the right opinion, the right stuff, the right whatever. And really sort of everybody else is less than by comparison, particularly those individuals who they sabotage and scapegoat and target to really let them know kind of the brunt of the aggression or the brunt of the judgment. And so when you really look at the fact of the cause that creates the effect of suffering, it's to understand some of the causative factors within yourself. Particularly if we look at and apply the work of Eckhart Tolle, the New York bestseller, The Power of Now, and his other book, The New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. This is a wonderful author, and one of the components that they really look at setting up is, and discuss and set forth, is the ego or the egoic mind. So, Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, had discussed this in his primer and his psychoanalytic works. And we talk about the ego as sort of that which interacts and relates to people in the matrix, in the everyday world, in the psychoanalytic topics, where people are power hungry, greedy, all these sort of unsavory aspects that you might attribute to someone who is toxic, manipulative, or narcissistic, even getting into the severe psychopathic realm where these individuals have no conscience, and it is all about an insatiable need for power and control. So no matter what label you want to put on it, it really does not matter. What really matters in healing is understanding the fact that you are suffering. And oftentimes, if we look at Eckhart Tolle's work, which I would highly recommend reading those two books by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, as well as A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life Purpose, it's very important to understand that the ego is the seat of judgment and naming things and sort of putting a label, especially putting a judgment label, meaning good or bad, right or wrong, better or less than. So this is really the cause, sort of that thought process, that thinking mind is the seat and the cause of the suffering. And so really, if you can get this right away, this will be a real, crucial sort of learning point or touch point to help ameliorate triggers or suffering, either chronic suffering, which seems to kind of be in part of your everyday life, or triggered, situational triggers, music triggers, food triggers, whatever it is that sort of launches you into sort of thinking about them, Maybe it was where they used to take you, or music that you used to, take in together. Whatever it is, a lot of people do have trigger points that keep, the suffering going. There's always something there to remind me, like that one great song. In other words, it can be either reminding of the positive, or for a lot of people who suffer, it is of the negative, particularly that of judgment. And so if we look at judgment, oftentimes that is why people are trying to conform to these influencers, these egomaniacs, the people who are in positions of power, authority, the people who you must be deferred to, that you must deflect to, that you must, concede, yes, you're in the right, yes, everybody else is in the wrong. Your opinion is more valuable than others, and no one else is as valuable as you. These are the sort of feeling states that tend to engender relationships with toxic or manipulative people, and that cause a lot of the heartbreak. In other words, I'm not good enough for you. I'm not good enough to be included. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not quick enough. I am too naive. I didn't see that you were doing all this behind my back. And so I find out years later that this is what was going on. You were a serial cheater, a serial liar, someone who is, alcoholic or dependent on drugs, where they have, a lot in hiding, and they hide a lot of aspects of their personality. And then all of a sudden, then you expose them, and you're realizing that you're suffering, an ongoing state of suffering, or a trauma bond, which can be at the hands of these abusers. So to really sort of ameliorate and reduce and lessen and get rid of that suffering is to understand that oftentimes it's the thought forms, the judgment that you draw from and extrapolate from these relationships, which is the cause of the suffering that you experience physically, mentally, emotionally, even into a lot of people's essence, into their spiritual nature, that they don't even feel saved or connected to something greater than, more holistic, beyond this person. In other words, it all stops right there with this individual for a lot of people. A lot of people suffer, emotional blocks, physical blocks, spiritual blocks, because of these relationships with toxic people who are wanting to permeate a lot of judgment, right or wrong, good versus bad, powerful versus unpowerful, mine versus yours. And so there's this real divisiveness, there's this real break, there's this real division, a real gap, a real wall between who's in and who's out, who's good and who's bad, who's smart and who's, dumb, who's ugly versus who's pretty. This whole judgment then that is set forth by these individuals is the cause of the suffering. It becomes then the thought forms. It is this feeling of being on the wrong side of judgment, the wrong side of tracks, which is the cause of this suffering. The I'm not, the I don't have what it takes. My opinion is flawed. There's all this often that is in the seat of the ego, which is where all the thoughts take place, really is to look at and to understand that to remedy a lot of this suffering is to remedy actually all the thinking that goes along with kind of coming through these relationships. The actual thoughts are like the Maya. They are the cause of suffering. There's a lot of this set forth in Buddhist ideology as well, that understands that a lot of this descriptors causes a lot of the suffering. It is the thoughts, the actual thinking mind, which is the seat and storehouse of a lot of this suffering. So it's not in your being, it's not in who you are, it's in the thoughts and then what you extrapolate or derive from that judgment, which then causes the suffering. It's to overthink and to be, over-identify with their judgment, to over-identify with their opinion, because they would love to have it as so. I am the one who is right. Everyone else is wrong. I am the winner. You are the loser. There's all these polarities that tend to, be set forth within these relationships with toxic, manipulative individuals, where you don't feel accepted, you don't feel supported, you don't feel the love, you don't feel the creativity, you don't feel free, you don't feel safe, you feel endangered, you feel criticized, you feel condemned, you feel ostracized, you feel isolated. Oftentimes these feelings, which are the cause of suffering, i.e. pain, are at the hands and mercy of the thoughts that are rolling through the mind that are the cause of this suffering, the very overthinking and the listening to those thoughts, which are nothing more than a storehouse of the ego, which is the cause of a lot of the suffering to begin with. And so it is an actual B state where you're not in this overthinking spot that can help ameliorate and lessen and reduce the suffering. When you realize that all those thoughts are the cause of the suffering, it then is important to help reduce and stop those thoughts. Is to let them go. It's to stop over-identifying with them. You are not just your thoughts, just the way you are just not your pinky toe. You are not just your thoughts. You are not just your feelings. These can come and go like a pair of socks that then gets worn out and then you have to throw out that no longer serve you. It is to understand that certain thoughts don't serve a positive purpose for you, and that there's something beyond on a feel and be state, which is more truly chronic and truly consistent, i.e. connected to the source, i.e. that which is your essence, which is there before and will be beyond either this person, the things that they have said, the things that they have done, the ways that they have looked at you, and that impacted you in a negative, sort of toxic way that leads to suffering on your behalf. So really look at and try to de-identify with all the thoughts and the conclusions that you have derived about yourself, the world, your relationship, your family, your job, what you can become, that has been sort of really anchored to this negativity, particularly the thoughts. And, a lot of, in psychology, it might be known as the monkey mind. I've never really thought that's a great way to describe it, but for a lot of those people in psychology, that's what they call it, the monkey mind. I have never really identified with that, as someone who is, sort of worked through and studied this. That's not a situation that plagues me. So I don't really, I don't call it that, but for another way to put it is always the thought preoccupied mind that is preoccupied with I am not enough and I always need to be more. That judgment and a lot of those thoughts are nothing but created by the ego, which is the cause of the suffering. So if you can expand your healing tools today and kind of look at and understand that, it's to understand that that's really oftentimes the seed and the solution to remove, it is the place and the removal place of those blocks that lead to the suffering, especially those thoughts which lead to I am not enough, I want, in other words, want is always based on lack. So when we look at this philosophy, to want health, I want health, part of you in saying that might mean, part of me is not healthy, and so you're living in the negative. So it's to really look at really this profound, simple yet complex concept, and to look at and understand that thoughts are nothing more than a creation of the egoic mind. And it's okay to de-identify with those, particularly the ones that are, created and create that judgment, that black or white or more than, less than, in those sort of polarity aspects. Because those are nothing more than learned concepts, which you have then identified with and that have been too weighty too negative, too toxic led to the heartbreak, the dysfunction and the disconnect. And then living, tied to those and committed to those negative thoughts. So look at and really sort of understand today, to what degree are you over-identifying with the negative thoughts, which are like a heavy anchor, which are like a heavy weight, which are like a heavy blanket, which is just keeping you stifled and unhappy in a state of suffering. See if you can grasp that concept and learn to let those go and to just learn to be and to be. It sounds very simple. It sounds very anti-social, meaning i.e., getting the truth that you are enough. Oftentimes, society will lead you to believe all the opposite. You don't have enough. You're not awake enough. Go get a coffee. Go get a this. Life on the run. Eat on the go. Eat in the car. Talk in the car. Talk and eat and drive in the car. Talk, drive, text, and, compute whatever in the, all of this multitasking, which oftentimes progress in society is oftentimes tied to what degree can you have more of. So does that really make a success when you really think about it? Or does that in fact lead to more suffering and more, jealousy and envy, and then trying to then engage in this toxic sort of relationships, people who are manipulative, who are trying to get the more and everybody else the less, or is going to be suffering because a result of their egoic judgments. Does that make sense at all? I really hope it does. I mean, we could go on with this topic for quite a long period of time, but I want to keep things concise and short so you can see how this perhaps could be a cause of a lot of suffering for you, and that letting go of some of this will actually bring you a great amount of relief and peace and serenity. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace out. Love you.